whole nother level, but still keep it ghetto. Whole nother level, but still keep it ghetto.
Welcome to episode 7 of The Process of Hip Hop. I'm Brian Joseph, writer, blogger at theprocessofhiphop.com, and as always, it's all about the process. In today's interview segment, I'll be talking to the hip-hop collector, Brian Ngata. What started out as a hobby has turned into Rapzines.com. So let's get into it.
It's Brian Ngata from Rapzines. How's it going, man?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining the podcast. So,
No problem.
Brian, you are the proprietor of Rapzines, and I kind of wanted to get some info about your background and specifically when and how did you get interested in hip hop?
All right. So, growing up, when I was younger, back in the 80s, I used to listen to a lot of the old school hip hop and break dance and do that kind of stuff as a kid. In elementary school, we were listening to Run DMC and Beastie Boys and all that stuff. And it was kind of just the only things we really listened to, that and some LL Cool J, stuff like that. But as I got older, I kind of, when I became a teenager, I kind of really fell in love with Public Enemy. And at that point, I really started digging into hip hop. And I know that about that time is when I first got into, I got a issue of The Source. I got one over at, I believe it was Tower Records or Sam Goody's. It was one of those two places. And, I just started, it just pretty much really took off from there. I really got into it and, I wanted more and more and more. And I just started really just getting really into it at that point.
And again, The Source magazine was really, up until that point. And again, obviously we're about the same age and I was alive during that time. And I remember prior to that, there really wasn't a rap official magazine. You had things like Right On or Tiger Beat that were, kind of catered to the R&B crowd and the pop music crowd, but you didn't have a rap magazine that really focused on hip hop from an authoritative standpoint until The Source. So do you remember what was it about The Source, just kind of to start, that really attracted you to that magazine?
It was really just, it was a need for information for me is what it came out to be, because, I heard what was on the radio. I was one of those kids where I listened to the radio and have the record button pause with my tape deck, waiting for the next song to come out and then try to record it and make my own mixtapes. And I just wanted more information, more music. And I felt like I didn't have enough. So when The Source came out and I was reading all this stuff about the East Coast and, all the artists that were coming out of there, they had their sections of up and coming rappers, they just everything in it. It was just a huge amount of information. And I just kind of ran with that. That was really the thing that stuck with me. And that was pretty much the beginning of it. I was waiting every month for that Source to come out and just read it from front to back,
And we're not talking about just a few magazines here and there that you have on the coffee table. You actually have several. I mean, how many actual magazines do you have at this point?
As far as the magazine part of my collection, at the moment it's cataloged at about 3,400. And I still have another 1,500 to go through, possibly 1,500. I think it's a little bit more, but at least 1,500 more that I have to catalog. And in that 1,500, there's still a lot of duplicates in there. So the number might get down to maybe 700 more to add to that. So it's probably going to roughly come out to about 4,000 as of now, as of today. not including pick up, but probably about 4,000 is what I'm looking at right now.
That point where you started to become a collector?
It was really weird because it was never, I guess I always think about that, and part of it must have been because when I was younger, I used to collect baseball cards, basketball cards, and comic books when I was younger. And so just kind of keeping in sequence and getting the next issue of X-Men or whatever I had, I always had that kind of collector's feel in me. So when I started getting The Source, not only did I read them, but then I also thought the same process that I thought with my comic books. I got to bag and board it. I got to keep it fresh so that, I can go back and look at it or something. And so it morphed in a long period of time, because every time I got a magazine, I would just kind of read it, bag and board it, go back and reference it, because it was basically like my internet. I had to go back and, oh, I missed this album, or I haven't heard this right here. So I'd go back and reference them, and I always just took care of them. So it really just started there. And then what happened was I started listening to Public Enemy, and I was listening to a lot of East Coast hip hop. And then I started listening to a lot of Bay Area hip hop at the same time, and West Coast hip hop when it started really bubbling. And I felt that there were other magazines out there that were talking about those. So I started, dabbing into all these different ones like Double XL. Let's see, at that time, Murder Dog magazine out of the Bay, just different magazines from different regions, so that I can get even more stuff out of them. So it just kind of accumulated that way, and then it became like a little bit of an obsession of, I need to find out more information, more and more and more. And so it really just kind of morphed into it, because after time, I just ended up getting them as they were coming out at that point. And then at one point in the mid 90s, I believe I think eBay was starting to come up and being used. And what I would do is I just went back and tried to get as much information I can and go back and buy other issues. And so I think at that point right there is when I was like, okay, there's all this other stuff out there that I don't have. So I'd go back and look for like the free publications that they used to give out over at the record stores in New York on the East Coast and stuff like that. I would get stuff like Props magazine, and I went back and retraced like Ego Trip magazine, and just a lot of Bay Area magazines too. So it was just kind of where that's about the point when it started to become more of an obsession collection kind of thing. And that's pretty much where it took off.
And it's funny you say when you said Double XL, I was thinking, the founders of Double XL used to be with the Source. So that's some other information that some people may not know. I mean, the Source original group, some members of after that that whole organization kind of not disbanded, but started having those disagreements, and that's when they broke off and became Double XL, which is interesting. So you're now this, collector, so to speak. And what was that, and you started collecting different things. Tell me how you actually turned that into, because you have a full website. So, I mean, by the way, and I'm gonna post this in my show notes, but you have Rapzines.com, where again, you have it very well organized, all these different types of hip hop collectibles. What was the point that you started that?
It actually, as I got older, I kind of was looking at all this stuff, and it used to amaze me. And at that time, I really didn't look at it as if other people really collected rap magazines. I actually kind of thought it was weird. Like maybe I just have this weird little thing that I like to collect rap magazines, and I've never put it out there before. So I kind of started to get to a point where I was like, why am I just keeping all this to myself, and just kind of looking through it? Why not put a website to put out there so other people can look at it? I really wanted, a big part of it was I wanted the younger generation to be able to see it too, just to kind of spark something in them maybe, and look at them and go, oh, wow, look at this. This was nice. Or, how you have some of these younger cats now that really are into the old school hip hop stuff. So sure. I thought this will spark a little bit of interest or something like that. You know what I mean? Like that they would see it. Also to just share it with other people. And I also used it because I started having so many piles of this stuff that I needed to organize it. So I kind of used it as all three of those things. Let's put it all together, and just as I go through it, take a scan of it, throw it up online, just kind of get it all organized. And just to give props to people, like I put on there, like the writers, I put it whenever I find notes of who was the publisher or the writers that were in there, I always leave a little note on the page for that specific magazine, So that was pretty much the reason. I just kind of wanted to do it just to kind of share it, because I felt like, maybe somebody else out there wants to look at it too, you know.
Now, what has been the response that you've had from hip hop heads around the world?
Man, a lot more than I expected. I mean, I get some cool comments. I get people who really are like blown away by it. I've had lots of people that are like documenting hip hop come and ask me for certain things that they're looking for. That's been the biggest thing that really kind of opened my eyes, because, I've had people come looking for specific articles that they were in, or I run into people who are doing documentaries. When they did the Straight Outta Compton movie, they asked me to look for some images in there that they used to replicate the houses that were there, or Easy's house and stuff like that. Just I've had people looking for articles because one guy from the Huffington Post was trying to get one of the rappers out of jail, and he wanted to get as much documentation as he could from, I think it was like some XXL magazines, or it was or it could have been Rap Pages. But this rapper named Mac that was out of No Limit camp, who got sentenced. And so he did a thing in the Huffington Post, and I started realizing, like, wow, like this stuff before the internet is captured within these pages, but they're not out there online. So it kind of made me open up, that I was like, wow, there's people that can really use this as a resource,
Well, and I think it's powerful because, much like you said, baseball cards, comic books, there's something about a tangible item that you have that just has a magic to it. So,
no doubt.
I mean, even with the proliferation of the internet, obviously you can find anything, but there's something about, again, having that actual tangible item. So let me ask you, like, where do you house all these things? I'm just trying to imagine, like, where do you have these housed?
Okay, so I had them in two places at one point. All my old inventory, like stuff that I just had that I had accumulated, I had in a storage. And then as I got new stuff, I started stocking with me in my place. So just recently, I started really cataloging everything, and I started consolidating everything into one place. And now, as you say that, in the last 2 months, I've been housing them in my garage, but everything is in there now. I'm kind of like isolating my garage as a place to hold all this stuff now. And so I have like one wall that's going to be dedicated to just all my magazines bagged and boarded on shelves. I got another section that I want to put, all my CDs, records, and tapes. I just recently dug up, from my old place, I dug up some tubes, and they had all my posters that were stashed up, that were actually on my wall as a teenager, all my hip hop posters. So I have those in tubes, and it's just great going through them, because I haven't seen them since I locked them up, since we moved, which was in like '92. So it's pretty crazy. So I have just stuff everywhere right now, but I mean, it's organized, but it's not really organized, because like the CDs, I like recently I just put an Instagram post where I'm just like, I don't know what to do with this. Just mounds and mounds of CDs that have been piling up for the last 30 years. So that's pretty much, it's all consolidated in my garage right now.
Now, let me ask you, 3 to 5 years from now, where do you see this actually? Because I mean, I'm thinking of how big business is in terms of collectors. I mean, you have conventions that go on for baseball cards and things like that. Where do you see this going 3 to 5 years from now?
It's actually that's a good question, because for me, I've been thinking the same thing as far as my stuff, because for me, this is stuff that I've grown up with, and it's my passion, and it's stuff that I really enjoy collecting. And I've actually, in the last couple of years, really been deciding on what to do with it, because I want it to be used for research, and I want it out there in the public, but I'm still haven't really figured out exactly what I want to do with it. But as far as collecting, I can see online, it's kind of weird, because I don't really purchase online too much anymore. unless it's something really unique or that I need in my collection. And it's really there's really not a lot of the old stuff up there anymore. And when you see one pop up once in a while, it's like $75 for an issue. And I remember back in the days, I was popping like lots of them, like a box of 30 of them for like $20 or something like that. So the game has changed a lot with those, and they're becoming pretty rare and hard to find, more than rare. I think they're just really hard to find. And when somebody has one, there's some collectors out there that really want it. So I'm not really sure. You know, everybody's trying to archive this stuff now. They're starting to realize that hip hop's here to stay. You know, they thought it might be a fad like disco, or it wasn't going to blow up the way it is. So it's really interesting to watch. Like I look on Twitter and Instagram and watch other people's stuff, and I'm like, you know, people are really starting to go back and realize either it's important or that they want to collect some of that stuff when they were younger. So I really don't have an answer for you about that. I just know times are really changing with it. And, you know, people are doing a lot of documentaries and really looking for this. I got two people actually right now that are trying to go back and find photos and articles about, you know, people like Mary J. Blige, and somebody else is looking for something on Raekwon. And I've been helping them out, and I'm realizing that you don't get all the information you want online because there's still stuff that's trapped in these magazines that aren't out there online. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now I just kind of said what your website is, Rapzines.com, but if people want to get in contact, stay in touch with what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think Instagram's the best because, you know, I don't have like a lot of time. I do it on my off time. And one of the things about Instagram is, even in my title, it just says, you know, follow me on my journey. All I'm doing is I'm just going and documenting and taking pictures of stuff as I pull it out, you know. So if there's something that moves me or I remember something that's really cool, I'll snap a picture of it and throw it on Instagram. You know, I don't really flash it everywhere else on social media or anything like that. So that's probably the best way to stay updated with all the stuff that I'm pulling out.
Okay. Well, Brian Ngata, Rapzines.com. Thank you so much for joining the Process of Hip Hop podcast.
I appreciate it, man.
Hope you've enjoyed episode 7 of the Process of Hip Hop. Join us next week for our next episode. Process of Hip Hop is produced and edited by me, Brian Joseph. Executive produced by Dale Harewood. Music by DJ Big Mike of Realside Records at realsiderecords.com.